We're just going to chat, Chris, and no agenda on my end. If you have stuff you want to talk about, stuff you want to promote, fantastic. I'm just curious about picking the brains of other people that are involved in cycling from an event promoter's perspective.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Fantastic. So for those who don't know Chris, this is Chris Carlson, definitely a legend, national champion, multiple times.
Yeah, multiple times.
Okay. And forgive me, I've bonked my head a couple times over the past few years, so some things have fallen out. Was there some sort of world record in the mix that you were attached to?
I have set a few world records. I think right now I've got 2 that are still alive.
Is there a world championship in the mix for you somewhere along the way as well? I knew about the national championships.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Well, there's actually 20 of them.
20 worlds?
Yeah, it predates you.
Okay.
I mean, my memory is you came on the scene and thank you, made gravel a thing. I mean, I think you're part of the national gravel story. You're part of the international gravel story because Texas is a fairly big racing community relative to the size of the U.S. racing community. And we had gravel races in numbers and in quality, I think, ahead of most of the rest of the U.S. And you put on a gravel race that I think by, you tell me if I'm wrong, your own surprise, turned out to be a pivotal moment in gravel racing in the U.S. And that's when Lance showed up at Texas Chainring in 2017. And it was a pretty well contested race. It got a lot of publicity. But I think, again, you're part of the story, and that event was part of the story. Gravel exploded across the U.S. And now I think, it's a UCI World Championship now, so you'd have to say it's gotten to a pretty significant level around the world.
Oh, I appreciate those kudos here. It was dumb luck for us to have Lance show up for that race. We were excited as heck. When I saw that, I'll be honest with you, when I saw that sign up come through, I just thought it was somebody pulling my leg. He brought a crew.
Crosby was in that race.
Oh,
Matt
definitely.
Stevens was in that race. You may remember better than me. I think I had done Chainring before that.
You definitely had done it prior to that.
I think I did your second or third iteration. It started from where we park now.
Yeah, your first one, and then I'll be honest with you. It was a big deal for Lance to show up for that event. A bigger deal for me was when you finished your first Texas Chainring Massacre and the smile you had on your face, grinning from ear to ear, and the first thing you said, that's the most fun I've had on a bicycle.
It's still fun. Brian Foley won, Adam Coble was second, and my son Zach was third. And part of my smile was Zach third, and there was, I don't know, 100 miles of racing in there, but the part that I had the most fun with is at some point we turned into a crosswind, and I said, Zach, get on my wheel. And I put it in the left tire swath, right tire swath, just enough that Zach had room to ride, in the sweet spot, but not enough room left for Brian or Adam or the other 50 people that were still there. And by the time we turned right out of the crosswind, the only people that were left were me on the front, Zach was on my wheel, Adam Coble was there, Brian Foley was there, and
you got Ryan from Denton.
Ryan Drumgold. Everyone disappeared, and I said, and then I disappeared. I was like, go, Zach. And I swung over. Drumgold came along, and I jumped on his wheel, and I'm like, oh, maybe I can get to the finish and end up fourth. Ryan had bad luck and flatted on a tubular. This is kind of before...
This was before gravel bikes.
Yeah,
this
before
was
gravel
bikes
and really
gravel
before
setups and people having the
tubeless tires they were around, but people kind of didn't really understand them.
That's why I think that was probably 13, maybe 14.
Yeah, and I frankly, when I think back on it, I was riding, Bosak and I were riding aluminum Specialized Crux. I think we had on like 33. They were UCI cyclocross legal. So 33s.
Right.
I can't believe we didn't flat.
Well, for years I was telling, what tire should I get? If you can do 38s or more, 40s or more, you got to do that. And for years people were saying, oh, no, we don't need that to go fast. And now on gravel, 40 plus is kind of the standard.
Yeah. I rode 40. I have mostly ridden 38. This last Texas Chain Ring, I rode 40s.
And it didn't slow you down, did it?
No, I felt, it was a complicated analysis to what made the difference. The 40s, I think, were part of it. I also, for the first time, had a purpose-built gravel bike. And I was super comfortable, like I've never been before. Normally, I feel a little bit beat up, but this time all carbon fiber, including the bars and the stem and the seat post. Okay. And I just think that and the 40s, tubeless, and that made a difference.
And to be fair, we probably had the smoothest course we've ever had for just the way the weather conditions and road maintenance work. It's just a luck of the draw thing.
That double track that you put in?
Yes.
That was sweet.
You liked it? Good.
My whole race strategy changed because of that double track. I had a teammate who was doing a lot of work, Cullen Dar, and he was covering stuff, and I was literally not doing anything. And having done the race a number of times, knowing the finish, I felt good about just getting away and winning it near the very end. But when we hit that double track, and then I looked on my GPS, which I saw the 90-degree turn in the middle of that double track, I'm like, oh, I have to attack here. I have to. And I went from the back to the front and just pinned it, and that's where I went away. So there were 5 guys chasing, and Colin did a good job of kind of not helping with good organization of the chase. But it was. I think that's about 21 miles from the finish.
Sounds pretty close to right, yeah.
Yeah, and they caught me with, I think, 2 or 3 miles to go.
Okay.
I felt good that I didn't get dropped, and I was able to give Cullen the lead out. And I felt so good in the lead out, I decided he was going to have to come around me. I wasn't swinging over.
You had it with.
But you heard me.
A turn to go is what.
I know. I thought I got this, and he went.
All right, tell the story.
Well, I went into that corner.
Paint the picture of what that last chicane S-turn. It's not even the chicane. It's more than that.
I'd say it's more than a chicane. It's too hard.
It's too hard 90s.
90 degrees, and.
Really
I followed my own coaching advice, which I had given the day before or that morning to a number of my riders that were at the event. Go and ride the last half a mile to mile of the finish, so you know what it is, and take note of this, that, and the other thing. Well, I did that. So I screwed this up. It just tells you cycling's not as simple as some think. I rode it, and there was this giant pile of dirt in that second to last critical corner, and it was very loose, and there were some chunky rocks, and the road was in a little bit worse condition right before that turn than it is in years past. They'd done some kind of work on it.
They were doing something.
But that pile of dirt messed up the sight line. It made it look like that corner was much narrower than it really was, because as you came into it, you couldn't see the apex, and you were worried about trying to hit the apex because there's this pile of dirt there, and you're worried I'm going to clip my pedal on it or something.
Sure.
So I rode it, and I'm like, okay, this is good. I know if I'm first here, I'm winning. I still feel that way. Except that I went into it so hot, there was a little drift, and I put my head down because I was worried that I had stalled enough in the drift because I had to get out of the gas. And I just put my head down, and I did 5 pedal strokes and went right past the last turn. And still got third. But just
on the 82 miler.
Just made me kick myself
not trying to call you out or anything. Anyone can look up your age group, where you're at. How old are you, Chris?
59.
59.
60 this year. So racing age 60.
Racing age 60. All right. And Colin's how old?
I think Colin's 16 now.
16.
The Bike Mart team, Torchy's Bike Mart, we're focused on development. So 16 to 25, 26, we've got a few older guys. that are still very competitive just because I need help herding the cats.
Sure. Colin's 16, he's first. You're racing age 60, you're third. Aston Haswell got second in y'all's race, right?
Right.
I think Aston's mid-30s?
I think he's really a big part of the story about why I got chased down.
Okay.
The guys were like, do we need to chase that? I mean, the beard and being 60s may be a little helpful because they're like that.
It's like a sleeper.
That's like, we have to chase that. Go! We have to chase that. I think my teammate Chris Powers had won the very first chainring, which I think was 2 years before that.
2010 was our very first chainring massacre. So we started that one from the paintball facility next to Texas Motor Speedway. So right there, basically North Fort Worth. Back in those days, we could start there and have gravel all the way to the Red River.
Yeah.
Well, basically all the way through to Oklahoma. At that time, we were doing our events through USA Cycling, but gravel wasn't a recognized discipline. So I thought there was a really big opportunity in there for USA Cycling to kind of get involved with gravel, but I also thought it was kind of necessary for them to recognize it's not traditional road racing. It is a different discipline, needs to be looked at a slightly different way. And they weren't catching on to that.
Yeah, they sometimes struggle to adopt as quickly as they need to.
Well, that's human nature. It's organizational nature. And I was not saying that as a criticism towards USA Cycling at all.
Well, and I'm not either.
They missed an opportunity.
They missed an opportunity. They've caught on now. I think. Will that be for the better? I asked the same question.
It'll be interesting to see how it shakes out.
UCI. It's definitely the fact that there's now a world championship at the UCI level for gravel racing is a huge deal, and it's going to change. In my view, it's going to change the complexion of a significant amount of the gravel racing that goes on, gravel racing and rides that go on in the country. And I think some of that will be really good, and I think some of it will frustrate people. I think it has the potential to, in general, increase the kind of entry price for racing, which I don't think is good, because in this country, entry price for our sport is a challenge for where we need to be. We're not nearly as diverse as we need to be, and we don't get nearly the fair share of talent that we should, given the size of the country and its population and its athletic potential. We definitely do not dominate it today, right? Because cycling is, at this point, a European-centric sport. So gravel, I don't know if it's fair to say we invented it. I mean, the Tour de France took place largely on gravel when it's...
Yeah, I agree completely that racing on gravel did not originate in the United States, but I think...
The current iteration of it
gravel grinding...
Yeah, the current iteration of it did, and what I think is going to happen...
The group event that also has a competitive element in it for those that are competitively inclined, I think that's a very American approach to it.
I agree with that. At least at the elite competitive level. And in the U.S., we have races that are at that level. The Europeans are going to come to dominate those if they come over here and do them. I think there's going to be more gravel races now in Europe. And just like with road racing, that may cost us some good events here in the U.S. because it's just a long way to come to race your bike from Europe all the way to the U.S. I mean, we no longer have Tour of California. We no longer have Tour of Colorado. We no longer have Tour of Utah.
You touched on actually some hot buttons for me there. And I actually, hopefully I'm not shooting myself in the foot here. I think there's still an opportunity for USA Cycling or something comparable. I don't think grassroots promoters like myself and some of the other independent guys have the wherewithal to pull off something like this. Quite frankly, I don't think the Lifetime series and the big commercial events have a desire to. But I think there's a middle ground of some sort of organizational structure that works in conjunction with communities and states and regions and stuff to do something like the Tour de Colorado, but on a gravel basis, but it would take such a coordinated effort that it's somebody that's in between what the existing gravel scene is. I think USA Cycling actually could be the right facilitator of some. I mean, obviously it's outside their capability to do it all themselves, but I think they could facilitate something like that.
Well, like a gravel stage race. You've done something like with RAT. Race Across Texas.
Yeah, we've done it. Yes, the Race Across Texas. We've done a stage approach to that, but it's it's outside my capability to really coordinate it with what would be ideal with all the communities and counties along the way and put the pieces together for it to be a package that makes sense. Is it something that every community, every gravel region could do every month? No, nothing like that. But at a national level event, something like that, like I said, the Tour of Colorado sort of thing, Tour of California sort of thing, move it to the dirt. But I think there is an opportunity for a very American approach to something like that. I would love to see that happen somewhere down the road.
Yeah, me too. My motto is all racing and riding is good racing and riding. I mean, I think anything that gets people on bikes, one, is healthy for them, and some of the people that get on bikes end up being quite good at it and having no idea going into it that they were going to be that good at it, and they end up wanting to be competitive racers, and they end up representing our country in international competition and doing well. Lauren Stevens would be a story. Emily Newsom as well.
And Emily's right up there as well.
Two stories along those lines.
At Spinistry, our motto was long, hard, and dirty. And we were really big on doing the 100-mile plus races. And as we were building up, that worked really well for our crowd. But then when gravel started kind of getting into that critical mass explosion and popularity thing and bringing in people from outside the traditional endurance formats, because gravel started with 24-hour mountain bike racers and randoneers and ultra endurance riders, generally speaking.
Yeah.
And when it started picking up other groups, we were getting lots of pushback on doing anything longer than 50 or 60 miles. And
so my story is I started in BMX. I got kind of big for it, so then I got onto the road. It interrupted my law practice because I was good enough that I kind of had to make a choice. Do I want to...
what year was this roughly?
Late 80s, early 90s.
Okay.
I graduated law school in 89. Opportunities, but I kind of had to choose. You're going to practice law or you're going to be a bike racer, and I figured I could practice law for the rest of my life. I can only do this like right now. Turns out I've proved that that's wrong.
When did you transition to coaching?
That's full-time. So after practicing law for 30 years, I decided, okay, I can go back to cycling on a kind of full-time thing like 6 or 7 years ago. And, I had done the math on it a few times while I was practicing law. And you get to know, what can you charge a month? How many athletes would you need? What is that in revenue in a year? And you make good money as a lawyer. You work your butt off. You have to have worked your butt off in law school and before that. So I'm comparing numbers, and they're not comparable numbers.
They're not going to slot directly on top of each other.
So anyway, I didn't think it was possible to make that kind of living as a cycling coach. I think it is. It's possible to make a different kind of living and be happier.
Yeah.
Everyone hear that? Happier.
Happier.
Okay. And I'm not saying that's for everyone, but I get to do things now that I only dreamed at, and they are part of my job.
I love my job.
And that's right. I mean, okay, so Kim and I we led 22 people around Mallorca last year. It was a ton of work. I was exhausted when it was over. There was a ton of work going into it. I mean, it's like promoting a race. There's just people don't understand the stuff that goes on. And, I'm responsible for 22 people in a foreign land. It's an island where we're riding bikes, so all kinds of stuff can go wrong. And by the way, some of these climbs, like you go over the edge and you're literally going. So it's like, I'm not, but I loved it. Amazing.
So the old adage is, I'm sure you've heard it, those who can do, those who can't teach. I think you're the perfect example of why that's not true, because not only do you teach now, you still do yourself.
I'm blessed to be able to still do. It's one, I don't think it's necessary to be a Greek coach. We have numerous examples of coaches that raced very little.
I have just like the most basic fundamental understanding of team tactics in cycling. The team tactics are so obviously important in traditional road cycling. There's been an attempt to apply some of that same stuff in gravel events. Obviously, you touched on it a little bit with some of the stuff that you guys did. Do you see those team tactics overtaking the gravel scene long term?
I don't know about overtaking. They'll get used. They are being used.
They are being used.
I mean, we already talked about in the 80-mile race at Chain
I guess that's what I'm asking. Is there more out there to be utilized that's not being utilized yet in gravel, or has what's been able to be adopted on the team tactics already in there? I guess that's a better way to ask
I would say there's probably nothing that can be used that hasn't already been used. Will it become the predominant form of the most competitive gravel racing? I don't know. Like, those that make rules about how we do gravel racing will pass a rule and say you can't have more than like two teammates in a gravel race. If we think that the best form of gravel racing should be largely void of just dominant team tactics. And I think there's an argument that you can make for that, and that argument is not exclusive to gravel racing. I think you can make this romantic argument about spirit of gravel, and it ought to be the rugged individualist going on their adventure, and the one that does the best at the adventure ought to win, and it shouldn't be the benefit of teamwork. I don't see that. That's not going to win at the most at the elite level of racing, and to a certain extent, that's going to work its way down. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's people that come to it with very uninformed and unrealistic kind of ideas about what it is, and that's part of the coaching job. That's fun. Like you and I know things about this sport that we don't necessarily think are worth paying for. But they are. And I didn't realize it either, because I used to only take racers. And then I helped some people. I had a kid that played soccer competitively, NCAA Division II soccer player. He came to me and he wanted to take a run at being a pro cyclist. And he had never raced before. And he had only ridden at the bare minimum. And like in 3 years, he meticulously worked his way up. We worked it together to where he got to be a CAD 2, and he won the Intelligentsia Cup race up in Chicago, so 11 days of racing. And I found that fascinating for me. He was one of my earliest with that kind of experience, and there's lots of others that aren't necessarily the competitive side, but it's like I want to eventually do Unbound.
Right.
I'm like, okay, well,
they're still competitive, but they're competing against themselves.
Yeah,
that's
and
the way I look at it.
And their victory is just as valuable as winning the overall race when you look at the journey and what's involved. And in fact, it may be harder, and it may be more fun.
Nutrition is such a huge thing these days.
Yeah,
it always has been, but I think we're kind of at the next phase on that. Where do you lean for your nutrition? Do you have a nutritionist yourself, or have you been around long enough where you know the ins and outs of it yourself and you pass that knowledge along? What advice would you give to people to get going down the right nutrition path?
I'm not a nutritionist. I don't have one. I take in a lot of research from people that are expert in that field. Dr. Stacy Sims is the one I probably listen to more than any other. I'll give some credit to my son Zachary. When he was racing professionally, he started to research it. And he actually came back to me and said, Dad, what you taught me is good, but it's not enough.
What is one thing that you think would get more people racing bicycles? Not riding bicycles, racing bicycles.
Racing bicycles. Wow. I think NICA and collegiate cycling are huge opportunities and need to be supported by everyone as much as possible. 3 or 4 years ago, I went to the Sackett's Ranch in Troy, where NICA has one of their early season mountain bike races. And there were 600 kids racing. And I'm like, holy crap, this is what we need. This could change things for cycling in the U.S. Racing, having the feeder system of something like NICA that then leads somewhat seamlessly into collegiate, that then gets supported by USA Cycling into the elite ranks, is a wonderful thing. Like your gravel races and having some high school competition, I think that's an opportunity. You know, I haven't thought about that much, so I like the high school scene and I like the collegiate scene. And you mentioned what could we get more people racing?
I think that might be worth digging into some. Yeah, I don't know how familiar with it you are, but we're making a big shift in our business model. We're still going to have entry fees, but what we really want to do is just try to get as many people that are members of Club Spinistry, and then just make everything available to them free of cost. Kind of along what you were saying, you work the math, going from attorney to coach. I've worked the math. It's like, hey, if we had this many memberships, we can just let everybody that's a member come join us.
Yeah,
for
you
rides.
wouldn't be chasing your tail on getting registrations.
Don't have to worry about if this one gets bad weather or whatever else. Hey, go ahead and sign up for it. If you guys can't make it, you're not out money for signing up for it, sort of thing. We'll make it up the next weekend or whatever. But the family memberships would really, because we have a stupid good deal on the family memberships, which if you have a parent that's riding some and a child or two that's in the NICA stuff or something, like, hey, let's put together some short course gravel routes. So I'm very, very happy to be that middle ground event that if somebody wants to use our stuff to get acclimated, trained up, in the groove for doing something else, like I'm perfectly happy being that guy.
And I kind of remember the way with my coaching people, like people have said to me, you don't charge enough. Same thing with the camps Kim and I do in Mallorca and in Fredericksburg and other places in the world eventually. It's like, you guys don't charge enough for this. It's like, you know what, we do it because we love it mostly, and we're charging enough to make a living, not get rich. I want people to feel happy about coming, that it's not too much, and they get there, and you know, it's definitely true of your gravel races. I think it's true of our camps.
Do you have a website if people want to see the stuff like that?
I haven't done a website because that too is too complicated, and you got to pay money to maintain a website.
Facebook?
Facebook and Instagram.
Okay.
Yep. See Chris Carlson Cycling Coaching. Kimmy Got Legs.
Okay.
Kimmy Got Legs Coaching. And the stuff about our camps is on there as well on Instagram and in Facebook. Although I was still practicing law for that very first Texas Chainring Massacre and a lot of races after that, which have been a lot of fun. When I think about some of my best Kevin Lee stories, the single track finish to Red River Riot that one year, I remember that first Hill Country Hyundai. Kim and I were out there together, mostly. Matt Stevens was in it to win it. I hope we get to do more races together. I'm sure we will. I would like to make Hill Country Hyundai this year. Rat is of interest to me. All right. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time, Chris.